Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Five Strikes Tonight. My name is Sydney Hunt with 30 South Soccer and MLSsoccer.com, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Friday, January 21st, 2022. Also, my mother's birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. She's not watching, but just want to give her a birthday shout out in case she comes across this for whatever reason. Yeah, first show of 2022. Glad you could come on board, whether you're watching live with us here on Friday night or watching later on. Thank you so much for coming on. A little bit of a new look for us. First of all, new camera, in case you didn't notice. New intro, some new graphics. Decided to spruce the show up here with the new year upon us, 21 days into the new year. But yeah, glad to have you on board. It's hard to believe for Atlanta United. Preseason is underway. The club started training this week. Actually, Tuesday was their first day at the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta training ground in Marietta. And really hard to believe how the weeks have gone by since the final match for Atlanta United against New York City FC and the MLS Cup playoffs 2021. But before you know it, the next match, or the first match of the 2022 season, will be here Sunday, February 27th at Mercedes-Benz Stadium against Sporting Kansas City. That is still a ways off, but like I said, before you know it, it will be here pretty soon. My guest tonight requires no introduction at all. Joe Patrick, co-managing editor of 30 South Soccer. You also know from 1990 The Game. Joe, good evening.
Sydney, good to be back with you, man. I'm just listening to you do that intro, and it's pretty amazing that we were so close to the start of the season. You know, when they put out the preseason schedule yesterday, and when I'm reading through it, I'm like, holy crap, the first preseason game is in 5 days.
No, exactly.
So it's really
Exactly.
on us, and it's always exciting, you know, when a new season is here and there's, you know, new players, a new team really that we get to follow along with over the course of the season. So it's always an exciting time.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a really fun season for Atlanta United, especially with Gonzalo Pineda starting his first full season charge with Atlanta United. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see how he really molds himself, or he molds his philosophy to the team. I want to ask you, you were at the training ground, so Gonzalo Pineda spoke on Friday. He was supposed to speak earlier in the week, but he was in health and safety protocols. But he was back on Friday today as we're coming out of the air. What are some of the comments he made in training on Friday?
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where you talk at the beginning of the season and you're just kind of, you know, you're optimistic about what you can get done. And it's just, you know, I think everybody's excited that training is getting going and that they're just kind of getting things underway. You know, so just to clarify, the team started training on Saturday. Actually, you were right that the first day that media was available to go was Tuesday,
Okay.
and that's the day that we found out
Okay.
that he, as well as like a handful of other players, had to enter a health and safety protocol. They entered that protocol on that Saturday when they came in for their essentially intake testing, and they tested positive. So I just didn't want anybody to get the impression that like they tested positive on Tuesday and they're back
Right.
a few days later. So those players had been out for a while, and Gonzalo Pineda, of course. And now it's great. Now every single one of them is back now. Mateus Rossetto was another player that was involved who was, you know, in the first team. There was some draft picks that were in there as well. So good that everybody's healthy. I don't think that any of them had symptoms. I asked, and I don't think there was any knowledge of you know, symptomatic disease or anything from any of the players. So that's all good. And yeah, I mean, Gonzalo Pineda's got, I think, a really great opportunity here this preseason to really get this team playing the way he wants them to play, because, you know, you kind of mentioned it. When he came in last year, obviously everybody was excited to see something else after the first half of the season that kind of, you know, was really it was just really a drag, you know, under Gabriel Heinze. But he had to really kind of do things on the fly, and I don't know if he could really implement exactly what he wanted to do right off the bat. So I think that this preseason is going to give him a great opportunity to, you know, get his players really playing in a way that he kind of idealizes his teams as playing. And he mentioned, he also talked a little bit about the new coach that the team added. His name is Eugenio. I don't even recall his last name, to be perfectly honest, but
me neither.
Yeah. So, but and he brings a wealth of knowledge, and, you know, kind of some interesting information about this. Actually, it seems like, you know, he was actually kind of looking for an assistant manager this offseason, and they had a They did a full on interview process, and they came down to a final four. And Gonzalo Pineda was interviewing these coaches individually, and they landed on Eugenio, who has a wealth of coaching experience. And I think that he will also Gonzalo Pineda will really benefit from having a seasoned coach like that in his ear, kind of giving him advice throughout this preseason, and once the games get going.
Yeah, Eugenio Villazon is his name.
That's right.
He played for Toluca and Liga MX from 1994 to 2002. And then he transitioned into the coaching ranks in 2003, starting with Cruz Azul, going to Toluca, Pachuca, and then back to Cruz Azul, Toluca, Pachuca again, and Morelia. So in 2017, he became essentially in charge of Morelia's reserve and academy setup, and then returned to Toluca in 2021. So a depth of experience, as he said, in the coaching ranks, and really a person that Gonzalo Pineda's known for a while. So it's be good to have him on board. Let's talk about. By the way, I want to disclaim something real quick. I'm trying a new streaming platform, so if things look a little off kilter, I apologize in advance. For example, I tried to do a two-up of myself and Joe. I can't get it working for some reason, but as long as you can see and hear him, that's the most important part. Let's transition, and you mentioned the players that were there. Let's talk a little bit about the players that weren't there, and in particular, the biggest name, of course, Ezequiel Barco, who has been excused from trading with the permission of Gonzalo Pineda. Of course, the big news that dropped on Friday is that River Plate is looking to bring him on loan. Pretty much all but done. All but official, should be announced according to Argentinian media within the next 72 hours. So Monday it appears. So like I said, looks all but done. Looks all but
Yep.
done. I want to get your impressions on the deal. I mean, it frees up a spot for Thiago Almada, and we'll talk about him later on. It frees up the spot for him, but as far as the return on investment, especially given how much Atlanta United paid for Barco, do you feel that they're getting a good ROI, especially given that they're going to loan him out to River, and then with River have the option to buy him if they so choose?
Yeah. I guess just to kind of first kind of touch on the rumor as it is right now. When Fabrizio Romano's on it, usually that's an indication that it's pretty solid. And Cesar Luis Merlo,
Here we
of course,
go,
has been
right?
on as well. Pretty much all the big time journalists have been all over this thing since it kind of broke the news this morning. So I certainly expected to go down. When I first saw that, exactly what we're talking about, it felt right to me. It like the Brazilian clubs felt kind of strange, almost like maybe backup options, if nothing else materialized. But this one certainly feels like more of a natural landing spot for him. Is it a good return? Is this what Atlanta United envisioned when they signed Ezequiel Barco? I think that you'd be crazy to say yes. I mean, I think when they signed him for $15 million, which was a huge transfer fee to dole out for a very young player at the time. I'm sure they were envisioning a Miguel Almiron type of sale, to go for upwards of $20 million to some Premier League team. But, unfortunately that it didn't work out like that. And, it's really hard when you talk about this question, and it's really hard to judge it nowadays because of COVID kind of landing smack dab in the middle of it. And the COVID has really just impacted the transfer market in a way that is going to throw all of these kinds of comparisons of like bought for versus sold for. It's going to throw all those out of kilter. I actually asked Darren Eales about this when he spoke with media this week, just kind of about the health of the transfer market. And he admitted that it's not yet kind of back to where it was. And that's why we're still seeing these kinds of deals that are loans with option to buys. And it's not just Atlanta United that's doing that. I mean, my favorite team, Tottenham Hotspur, seems like every single transfer that they do is a loan with an option to buy. And it's just because a lot of teams right now, not every team, but a lot of teams just don't have the liquidity that they normally would, and just in terms of the cash that they're able to hand over. So it's a tough transfer market to deal in, specifically if you're trying to find a place for a player to go who's maybe not, sought after by all the biggest clubs in the world, like Ezequiel Barco, who I think had actually, clearly his best season at Atlanta United last year. And I honestly think he was like one of the best attacking midfielders in the league last year. And Atlanta United had a good attack in that second half of the season. I think he's, everybody kind of struggled under Gabriel Heinze. The whole team just didn't get it going in attack. But I really thought that Ezequiel Barco was instrumental in everything that they did, and I thought that they really missed him in the games where he was out last year. So, I think that it's a tough one for Atlanta because you look at his time here. And certainly he had his bright moments, like I just mentioned last year, but clearly, like in the 2018 MLS Cup season, he wasn't that big of a part of it. He actually got off to a really good start into that season, his first year in Atlanta in 2018. But then obviously he had the off the field issue that kind of forced him into a different role. And then not well, I guess, as it happened from there, the team just kind of fell into a different shape and players got informed. Then he just wasn't really part of the starting 11 going forward after that and into the playoffs. So he wasn't involved at that much in Atlanta United's biggest success that they've ever had. But he had a productive time, but it's going to be always very hard to justify the amount that was spent for him, especially, like I said, in the wake of kind of this new market that we're in right now.
No, I was going to say something along those lines about Barca's just this overall form with him being with Atlanta United. It didn't quite come up to or live up to the, I don't want to say hype, but the expectations that a lot of the fans had for him, especially when we look at Miguel Almiron, of course, how he exploded onto the scene in MLS, and of course is playing in Premier League. And that's a whole other story. I mean, he's playing for a side that may be relegated, but that's a different story. But I mean, at the end of the day, that was a great piece of business for Atlanta United. But it hasn't gone that way with other players that they brought in from Argentina and from South America. We all know about Pity Martinez. We all know about now Barco now, who, again, that return on investment may not be as great that fans expect in the first place. But at the same time, you brought up an excellent point, and Darren brought an excellent point. The transfer market, which has been affected by COVID, has just shaken things up. So based on that, what would probably be in a non-COVID world, what would probably be a realistic expectation of where Barca would be from a financial standpoint?
Oh man, I mean, it's tough to really kind of nail that down because honestly, the way that at least the way that I make sense of a lot of transfers and the prices that are involved is like comparing them with other players, of similar abilities who are going to certain teams or certain leagues and how they might compare. Of course, with their age and all these other variables. So without that kind of available, it's kind of tough to say what he might go for. I know at one point, like I was thinking that, again, it's just really tough. Like I was thinking maybe Atlanta United could possibly get their money back if he turned it on. But then again, it's just, I don't know. It's really hard. It certainly never seemed like they were going to strike gold in the way that they did with Miguel Almiron, right? Like they were never going to have that huge kind of deal. In fact, it's funny you mentioned Pity Martinez. It's kind of funny, amazing that the club was actually able to make a profit on his sale thanks to the Deus Ex Machina, that is the bid from Saudi Arabia to come in and buy your most expensive player. But that club made a profit there in 2020. That was probably super valuable to them in a time where these teams, in the middle of 2020, when fans were coming into stadiums, I mean, that cash probably was a saving grace, honestly, for them. So, yeah, I don't know. It's tough to compare. I'm Sydney. I'm looking at the chat and I see one from Superman who says, "Isn't it smarter for purchasing teams to pursue a loan agreement with a purchase option anyway?" And I actually totally agree with that. I think like if you're the buying team, that is ideal to get a player in on a loan first, so you can kind of see what you have, and then just push that decision down the road. And if he performs really well for you, you already have a price in place where you can do something. So I definitely think that from the buying team, it is a smart strategy. But unfortunately, in this case, as it relates to Barco, I think the selling team would rather just get the sum in now. But that's the market and the world we're dealing with now, where that's not really as possible as it once was.
No, it's a good point by Superman, and thank you for your comment in the chat on YouTube. Then they continue to say, it says, is it good idea versus assuming it's all good? it'll all be good. So it's an excellent point. I do think Barkley would be a good fit in River Plate, if nothing more than he's an Argentinian and he'll be going home essentially. I forget where exactly in Argentina he's from. And obviously River Plate are a huge club in Argentina, River Boca and Independiente, etc. Those are the big clubs in Argentina. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. And again, it looks all but done. But as he said, like if Fabio Romano, if Cesar Luis Merlo are talking about it, and then we had Felipe Cardenas from the Athletic, friend of Dirty South Soccer, pretty much confirming the news through his sources, then it's pretty much all but done. That of course will open up a spot for Thiago Almada, and there are a lot of questions to be answered about Almada. Of course, the sexual assault issue that is still going on with him. Haven't heard too much about that, but that's come up obviously, and the question was asked of Darren Neals, or I believe Carlos
Carl,
Bocanegra,
oh yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
what the due diligence looked like, and the answer was similar to the NFL, but there's been a lot of blowback from fans considering NFL due diligence process isn't exactly perfect itself. So just your thoughts on that, and then I had a question from Twitter from Matthew Leach saying, it wasn't about Mata that, given the obvious red flags, the front office is so dead set on bringing men. So, what are
Mm-hmm.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that answer from it was Darren Neals when
Okay.
he was talking to media earlier this week. I thought that he was really just like trying to not answer that question at that point in
Mm,
time because he obviously doesn't want to. He doesn't want to talk about that issue first of all, but he
no,
also just like doesn't want to talk about a
right,
player who's not technically on the team yet. So
right,
I kind of understand why you'd want to deflect that for that reason. But this is clearly like an uncomfortable, point for the club and rightfully so. I mean, like, I think fans deserve to know like what the club has been doing in terms of looking into this issue and to see what happened because it's really hard actually to figure out what did happen in this instance. I've tried to look up as many reports as I can, and it's hard because I don't speak Spanish, so
right.
it's even harder to kind of filter through some of the news reports, especially when things are getting translated by Google Translate, which in a like a legal in a legal sense can really distort the
Yeah.
definitions of words and like what is actually being messaged. So it's tough. I don't know. So it's tough for me to really speak about it honestly because I don't know exactly what happened. But
Mhm.
he's not. He's still under investigation. It sounds like, but he's not been like he's not guilty or innocent at this point in time. He's just like under
Right.
investigation, I guess. And to me, like I still don't understand quite how he would be able to acquire a work visa if he is under like a criminal investigation
Mm,
in his home country. That doesn't really make sense to me. And so, if he is able to acquire that visa, maybe that would also, give us some sense of the status of his criminal case because I just cannot imagine that if he were under an investigation still that he would be able to acquire that. Now, regardless of this, the club is going to have to answer these questions.
yeah.
And I totally get them wanting to deflect on this stuff before he's on the team. But they need to talk about it. And if Darren is talking about the team doing due diligence on an NFL level, that's great. I mean, I
Right.
think that he was just kind of trying to when he said the NFL thing, I think he was just trying to say like we have resources to look into this so you can trust us on this. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, you're going to have to tell the fans of the team who are buying the tickets to the stadium, like what actually was the conclusion that you reached through that due diligence. So a lot of those questions are still yet to be answered. Gonzalo Pineda actually spoke about it today as well. And it surprised me. He really kind of went into it more than I thought he would. I thought, when the question came, he would kind of immediately deflect, kind of along the lines of what Darren did. And he basically just sent out a message saying, like, I hope people have, can like have forgiveness and stuff. I don't know how
Mm,
smart of an answer that was, although I
yeah.
know what he was trying to express. I kind of feel bad for Gonzalo Pineda because he's like being forced to answer some of these questions when I don't think it's really his responsibility to be answering them. Um, but like by saying like people hope people have forgiveness and stuff, it almost like presumes like a level of guilt there already. So it's just very tricky, and it's why I think it's unfortunate that there hasn't been more clarification from the club as to like why, like what the due diligence has been so far, and like just what his status overall is.
Yeah, so assuming, and again, with him under investigation, you brought up a good point. He's neither guilty or innocent at this point. I mean, I'm sure we'll learn in short order, whether or not there's something. I don't want to minimize it by any stretch of the imagination. The fact that he's under investigation is disappointing. I hope for his sake that he is innocent and that he is cleared of these charges. If he didn't do it, if he did, that's a whole other issue.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
United
Totally.
had no business bringing him in the first place.
Yeah.
But because assuming he does make it to Atlanta United, and Bruno brought up a question just now on Facebook. Do you think he'll be a day one starter, or do you see someone ahead of him right now on the team? I would assume he's a day one starter. That's just me. I don't think Atlanta United would be paying the amount of money they are allegedly or reportedly paying for Thiago Almada to be on the bench,
Right.
or super sub essentially. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he'll be a starter, 100%. Day one is kind of like you could say like, well, maybe he comes in, he's like not quite fit yet, so he doesn't start or something like that. But yes, he will definitely be the starter. I mean, in MLS, when you spend big money on these designated players like Atlanta United does, I mean that's kind of their MO, and the whole point is to get those players on the field as much as possible and extract as much production out of them as possible. That's why you paid all the money to bring them in. And like, let's make no mistake, like he is a tremendously talented player. He had a lot of interest from Europe. He's just like always, he's been very highly thought of. If you look at like the Guardian and some of their their top 100 players list they put out, he's been in there. He's just their top 100 like young players, whatever it is. Yeah, I mean he's just a very tremendously talented young player. And I think there are other things to worry about. Like obviously, again, not to minimize it, there's obviously there's this case, obviously that's on the top of everybody's mind. He's also made some comments that have concerned me. Like he's like mentioned that he would rather be in Europe, but
Right.
but this MLS thing kind of came together, and that's where he's going to be. And so you wonder about a player like that kind of being in the right frame of mind coming into this league in particular, because this league is a grind, and if you don't have that kind of like humility coming into the league, like we've seen, fortunately for Atlanta United, with a guy like Miguel Almiron, and maybe on the other end of that spectrum in Pity Martinez, you see the difference in like how those players are able to settle in and play their game. And so you hope that something like that also doesn't affect his performance. But just in terms of his talent, I mean, he's got all the talent kind of in the world, and you hope he can show that from day one.
Yeah, along with that, it's a parity league, right? It's not like most leagues in the world where 1, 2, or 3 clubs are the favorites year in and year out. But it's a more wide open league. I mean, you see a club that are middle of the table, last place, one year, then the next year they could be MLS Cup champions or close to the top of the table. Plus, you have that playoff system, which is another twist that you don't get in other leagues. But at the same time, you brought up a good point about Almada. There's maybe a little concern that he'll just kind of waltz into MLS and just go through the motions and hope that he'll end up in Europe someday. I think as a professional, I think he'll realize that he can't just do that. He can't just walk in and expect to be on the team sheet each and every week. He'll have to put out the work and put out the work and training, not just on the training ground, but in the league itself. Because it is a grind. You have to be ready for every opponent because, again, it's a parity league and anyone can beat anyone, as cliched as it is, as it sounds. Anyone can beat anyone from week to week basis. So, well, it is kind of a concern with his comments saying, "Oh, I want to go to Europe. I prefer to go to Europe," but this kind of came together. It is a little bit concerning to me, but I think he'll be in the right frame of mind if and when he does arrive to Atlanta.
Yeah, and let me be clear, like I have no problem with players, having ambitions to be in Europe. In fact, I
Sure.
like to hear that. I like to hear a player who is ambitious, and I think that if you were to poll a lot of Atlanta United fans, a lot of them don't care either. That they like if Atlanta United is going to be their bridge to get from South America or wherever they are to Europe, I think that's perfectly fine if they help the
Mhm.
team along the way. I think Miguel Almiron is just a really interesting case. And I think he's just kind of in a special place in terms of where he was in his career when he signed with Atlanta United. I mean, he's a player who wasn't really like highly touted. Coming from Paraguay, kind of a more of a workman yeoman
Mhm.
in uh, Liga Primera in Argentina. Of course, played really well once he got there and did a great job. But he always seemed like he just kind of have had that, that humble personality who just wanted
Yeah.
to come in and work hard. And he was generally, honestly, like a quiet guy. And it was kind of a perfect situation also for him to kind of come in with Joseph, who was the bigger personality, who would kind of take on a lot more of that media pressure. And I think that that's when you talk about like the media and the things that these players face. It is nice to have Joseph, who's kind of he attracts a lot of that spotlight onto him
Mhm.
here already. So I got no problem with a guy like Thiago Almada wanting to be in Europe, but I just get it's always a risk with players as young as he is. He's 20 years old. Miguel Almiron was a little bit older than he was when he came to
Sure.
Atlanta United. With just them just thinking that they're going to play here 1 year and then get out of here. Maybe he does. Maybe he does play 1 year and he plays
Yeah.
amazing and gets out of here. But if you come in with that mentality, I think there's just the risk that things don't go as well as you thought, and then you just kind of get in a bad headspace as a player, and it's hard to kind of turn that around. I think we saw that a little bit with Ezekiel Barco.
Mhm. I'll bring up another question from Bruno, and thank you again, Bruno, on Facebook, in regards to making deals for players. Going back to Barco, I guess making deals for players before we sell or trade some players. Maybe that's why we're trying to get rid of Barco for whatever they give us. I mean, I don't really have an issue with it, especially if the negotiations for Almada seem pretty far down the road. It seems like it's not a matter of if, but when the deal would be announced. So I would imagine it'll be pretty concurrent with the announcement of Bargill to River Plate, considering everything goes well, all I's dotted, T's crossed. So again, Brent, I don't have an issue with it personally, especially with Atlanta United having a plan in place already. And Atlanta aren't the first club to do this, right? I mean, other clubs around the world have done it, so they're not breaking new ground. Uh, what are your thoughts, kind of, on that?
It's a very like delicate dance that MLS GMs and technical directors and owners and presidents have to play because
Mhm.
um you know you only have these three DP spots,
Yep.
so you have to like really manage those delicately, in terms of you got to have good timing and getting one out at the same time you get one in. And when you're looking at how you do a transfer deal, these things are months if not years in advance, done in advance. Like there it really is a lot of foreplanning that goes into these things. In fact,
Mhm.
this Thiago Almada signing was actually like the bulk of it was done last summer. Remember when
Yeah.
there was reports that he was in Atlanta,
Yep.
and that they were going to sign him. So like this one's already really essentially been in the works for half a year. Who knows how long they were working on it before
Right.
that point. That was just when they submitted the bid. So it's just a tough dance, and I think that it's just the reality of the situation that these front office members face all across the league. Is I think on every team there's some bit of that because you're just trying to manage money,
Yeah.
and like paying for one player to come in by selling another, but especially in MLS where you have these designated slots, you just got to be. It's like a dance. You just got you got to be kind of in lockstep with these different transfers going in and out.
No, definitely agree. Definitely agree. Hey, it's a good point. It's definitely a good point, but yeah, you definitely do have to be careful, just in case something does fall through the cracks. Go ahead.
By the way, I want to say Bruno's right. The fact that like they are trying to like figure out something to do with Barco because
Right.
they've got this player coming in. So like, and we're kind of seeing that the trouble that they've had, and
Mhm.
just trying to arrange something to get things so that things at least fit, the puzzle fits at least for right now. And then if they don't, if River doesn't want to sign him permanently, then they can deal with that down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, we'll hopefully. It seems like we'll know more. Hopefully within the next few days here, Monday, Tuesday or so. in case something dramatic happens, but it does look like at least Ezekiel Barco is headed to River Plate and Thiago Almada at some point headed to Atlanta United. Hopefully before preseason training gets too far along. There's things with the visa and things like that.
I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but I would expect an announcement next week.
Mm.
If,
That's fair.
as soon as Barco gets wrapped up, I think that they would be ready to announce.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, we'll see what happens, and we'll see what goes on from there. Switching gears from club to country, number of Atlanta United players have been called into international duty. First off, congratulations to Machop Chol, the homegrown player, and he called in for South Sudan to play a couple of friendlies. So congrats to him. Ronald Hernandez, Joseph Martinez with Venezuela. And then let's talk about the United States men's national team. Of course, 3 matches and World Cup qualifying coming up for them. Starting next week against El Salvador Thursday, Canada Sunday, and Honduras on Tuesday. Miles Robinson, of course, called in. Miles pretty much mainstay in the 11 at this point, so no surprise. But Brooks Lennon, a name that made it on. He was called into camp in December for the friendly for against Bosnia and LA, but now called into qualifying camp or qualifying roster. So, and Superman saying no Bello, maybe a bit of surprise, but not entirely. Yeah, no Bello, a little surprise for that. So, let's talk about that first. George
Sure.
Bello not in the non-World Cup qualifying roster. With him being on the roster for the first set of games toward the 2011 matches, are you a little bit surprised that he didn't make it? Or Superman he had a bit of a rough showing in his last match out. He didn't stand out, but he didn't, I guess, impress in that regard, which is okay. But given that, are you still surprised that George Bello didn't make it?
I'm not shocked that he didn't make it for this camp, and I think it's kind of 2 reasons playing into one another. One is that he's not the number 1 left back at this point. I think that that's Anthony Robinson's pretty clear. And so if you're not the number like the best 11 left back that the team really relies upon, George Bello is right now has 10 days by just looking at the calendar, about 10 days to secure a transfer. If he is going to have a transfer to Europe somewhere, he's got about 10 days to do that. And so this is a very important time. And I do wonder if maybe they had a talk and they said, hey, for my long term, it might be best if I not be in this camp and I, have spend this next period where I would be playing with the team, trying to secure what's going to be going on with me. It's not guaranteed that he leaves, but I mean, there certainly have been the rumors. There was one, the most concrete one seems to have been from Watford that was reported in the Telegraph. I think there was also a rumor earlier, actually late last year, I think about Belgium. So, there's been some rumors for him clearly. And obviously we've seen that he's a tremendously, player with a lot of young or a lot of upside because he is so young. So it's not shocking to me that he's not in this camp with this team, in this particular one, just because of the timing.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. And I was just thinking, as you're talking about that, maybe Landa or Bellows Camp or somebody said, best not to call him up at this point in time. And as you said, he's young. He'll have plenty of more opportunities. There's a few more matches left in March. But at the same time, I want to talk about Brooks Lennon, which is really a surprise. Brooks, not really in the national team conversation over the past couple of years, but all of a sudden, here he is called into camp for December, then make his first national team appearance against Bosnia in LA, but now being called into national team camp for the qualifiers. I do want to kind of clarify too. Greg Berhalter called in 28 players, only 23, of course, give me on the World Cup rosters. But the fact that Brooks is being called in, I mean, is this maybe the beginning of him maybe working his way into the national team picture, or is it just kind of a one-off at this point, especially given the fact that Greg Berhalter has the ability to call in kind of an expanded roster, 28 players for at least training camp before going with 20 plays for the qualifiers themselves.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, congratulations, Brooks. I mean,
Mm,
I'm
yeah.
really happy for him because he's a player who just does things the right way. He's a humble guy,
Mm,
puts his head down, works really hard. I mean, works hard off the field or just like kind of out, not during games, but also during games. I mean, we've seen him as Atlanta United fans. You know, he's just one of those kind of engines who's always
yeah.
running. So congratulations to him, first of all, for this achievement. I hope he is able to play and show Greg Berhalter what he's got. You know, looking forward, you know, like kind of into the future for him, I think that obviously he faces, you know, more competition in that right back spot than, you know, than maybe Bello has. You know, because you can have Serginho Dest can kind of play on either side, of course, but obviously on the right side is his more natural side. And we'll see from there. But I mean, this is certainly, I think it's just a big opportunity for Brooks because he's, you know, due to injuries and other things, he's got this opportunity. He's made the camp. And again, that's why I really hope we do get to see him at least start one game just so first of all we can see him play, but obviously I want Greg Berhalter to be able to get a good look at him against this level of competition. So it's
Yep.
always good for Atlanta United's profile, of course, to have more players playing for the national team. I'm sure like Gonzalo Pineda might feel a little bit differently, you know, wanting all his players in camp. But no, I don't. I'm just kidding. I mean, I think that, you know, everybody's really happy for Brooks, and for a player at this age, you know, this stage of his career, I think that it's a really positive development. And so I surely hope that he can make the most of it and just kind of grab it by the horns and give Greg Berhalter something to think about going forward into future camps.
Yeah, again, like you said, congrats to him. You know, really good to see Brooks being involved. You know, some U.S. men's national team fans on Twitter, you know, not happy with the move, but no, I think it's a good move for Brooks. It's good for him to really, like you're kind of saying, show Greg Berhalter what he's made of and that he can play at the level, play at a high level, at least on a national stage. So good for him. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do, and maybe he does get a little taste, a little run out in this next window of qualifiers. Miles Robinson, of course, nothing more needs to be said
How
about him.
Sydney, how crazy is it that
I
he's
know.
worked his way up from not just like going back? I mean, it's crazy to think that like, he was like a draft pick from Syracuse and everything,
Hmm.
but just like the fact that he was not really in the national team picture not that long ago
Yep.
to like just in a year vaulted
I
himself
know.
to like the number one center back. It's
I
crazy.
know. I know. Yeah, getting to see, of course, in the Gold Cup and then Olympic qualifiers. Has done just a terrific job along with Walker Zimmerman. And, you know, there's questions to be asked, you know, if and when Aaron Long works his way back, but we still don't know when exactly that will be. But
Aaron Long ain't got nothing on Miles Robinson. Aaron Long ain't got nothing on him. I'm
well,
just kidding. I mean, I'm half kidding. I mean, I do think
right.
Miles Robinson's a better player, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but in Miles's case, and barring a major events until January 31st, looks like he won't be sold in this window. I didn't expect he would be. Um, but if he continues on this run of form, not just in the qualifiers, but you know, going into the first half or the first few months of the MLS season, do you foresee maybe a move for him in the summer window? Or if nothing comes together, as Bruno said, you know, maybe after the World Cup, do you see something coming together? And if so, which window would you expect a possible deal for him to come together?
Yeah, I want to even kind of like go back in time for a second because for a while I was thinking that he would almost certainly be sold in this current offseason that we're in.
Hmm.
You know, I was just thinking, you know, first of all, I'm kind of biased because I see him play every week, and you know, you could just see his skill defensively, his instincts, his ability to control his body, which is a huge body. Well, it's funny he doesn't look as big when he's playing next to next to Anthony Brooks, but John Anthony Brooks. But you know, he is a large figure, and he's just so incredibly athletic. He's able to control his body in very unique ways. I always say that, like, you know, it doesn't get talked about, but one of his underrated and honestly one of his best physical attributes is actually his balance. The way he's able to keep control of his body when he's at a full sprint and kind of stop on a dime and still able to like put in a tackle is amazing. Anyway, so I thought he was actually going to get sold in this off season
Yeah.
because I felt like if you were a team in Europe, let's say you're in England, and let's say you're like a mid-table team, like what's a mid-table, like an Everton. Let's just like throw them out there, or maybe a team that likes to spend a little bit more money than Everton. I don't know, but like you're having to go up against some
Spurs.
of. Yeah,
No, I'm just
yes.
kidding.
Honestly, I would have taken them as first. Honestly, like you're going up against strikers that are like elite level in terms of their physical presence.
Mhm.
That's where you see some of those biggest, fastest strikers in the world. And I think Miles Robinson's first of all the perfect player to kind of just match up against them. And yes, like his offensive game is definitely improved. But like even for if you're a mid-table or lower table team, if you're all just going to be doing a lot of defending, I mean, Miles Robinson's the kind of guy I think you would want to have against those kinds of strikers. So first of all, I felt like he would be a natural fit for that reason, and I also
Yeah.
just feel like this guy is going to be a star. Like you're already seeing him make more and more U.S. national team appearances. You've got a World Cup coming up at the end of 2022. Don't you want to have that kind of player on your roster for the marketing and all that stuff? Like, isn't this player going to be so valuable for you that
Yeah.
you can buy for, I don't know what you might say his price is, like $7
Yeah.
or $8 million or something like that? Like, isn't that a steal? And then, as time went on, and apparently there was no reported bids coming in, it actually made sense to me why Atlanta United is holding on to him. First of all, because they have got a really good team constructed under Gonzalo Pineda, and certainly have a chance to make a run for MLS Cup. But also the fact that you could have him be a member of Atlanta United while he's playing and starting in every game at a World Cup. And what kind of
Right.
financial rewards that the team could then reap, and in the wake of that, assuming that he plays relatively well, which he almost always does. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, my mind is really turned where I think that Atlanta United has definitely kind of played their cards the right way with Miles, and of course that's why they extended his contract and gave him a new deal
Yeah.
during the 2019 season when he really had that breakout under Frank de Boer.
No, that's a good point. If he has a great showing in the World Cup, certainly, his value will go off the charts. Of course, from a team standpoint, we don't know how the U.S. will do in the World Cup, assuming they make it, which they are in pretty good shape to do at this point, at least. But if he continues this run of form going into December, imagine how his value will skyrocket. Like you said, the draft pick, a super draft pick out of Syracuse, which didn't get that uh, playing time that he would have hoped for under Tata Martino, and try to find out who was talking about. Frank de Boer kind of helped him along, but Frank de Boer kind of gave him that first shot.
Yeah, Frank de Boer, yeah, put him in the middle of a back four, or
Yep.
in a back four, which is a more vulnerable position for a center back to be in, as opposed to like Tata would use him sparingly as part of a back three where he has a lot more protection and cover back there. Sydney, I want to ask you a question. So
Sure.
and when we could talk about it. Let's say the United States, they go to the World Cup. The United States has a young, talented team. They could do damage
Yeah.
in a World Cup. Like obviously, we're just going to be excited to see the United States back in a World Cup. But I mean, like this team really could do something. And so let's just
Mhm.
say that they advance through the group stage. And I think at that point, if you advance through the group stage, you play a big team in a close game, even if you lose it in the first round of the
Yeah.
knockouts. That's going to raise the profile, I think, of every player that
Mhm.
plays for that team. So
Yeah.
let's say in that circumstance, something like that happens. Like, what do you think Miles Robinson is going to be going for then? Like, it's
I think people will still be complaining about Greg Berhalter about who he puts onto the team because the guy can't do anything right in some people's minds. But if the United States, like you said, do make it through the group stage, and of course it depends on the draw. Um, I don't want to say double figures because I think that'll be a bit too high, but I would say high single digit or high single figures, 8-9 million wouldn't be that much of a amount for
yeah,
that much of an asking price for Miles Robinson. Now, depending on how things go, that could go up substantially, but he is a defender, and defender isn't really the quote unquote sexy position that a
true,
midfielder or a striker would be. So I don't think that he'd fetch like maybe 20 or 30 million or anything like that. Nothing
right,
crazy, but maybe that 8 to 10 million
yeah,
range. That's
and
just my
he
spitballing.
also he seems younger than he is. I think just because like he's only kind of has only really been playing full time for Atlanta United, like 2019 is when he came into the teams, at 2019, 20, 21. So he's really only had like 3 seasons under his belt, really. So he feels really young, but he also went to college and all that. So I forget how old he is right now, 24, 25, something like that.
That sounds right.
So he's a little bit older than he kind of appears, but yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of curious. I have no idea how much he might end up going for, but I just think the world of Miles Robinson in terms of his ability. It's really unique what he's able to do defensively, and it just seems like also like every year he's able to improve his game on the ball as well, and that's always good to see.
Yeah, he turns 25 on March 14th, so
okay,
he's still
so
young.
this is his 25-year-old year essentially.
Yeah. And you might argue, I mean, he still has his prime ahead of him. I mean, he kind of is already there, but I mean, being 24 years old, he has maybe 10 years left, 10, 12 years left in his career. You might argue that he still isn't in his prime, but with him playing the way he's playing right now is just incredible. And don't know what his ceiling will be, but just incredible to see how Miles has come along in really such a short time.
Yeah.
Let's talk about real quick the preseason schedule. I'll go through it real quick. So Atlanta United play 5 matches in the preseason. I'm sorry, with the Georgia Storm on Tuesday, January 25th. That's at the training ground that is close to the public. Their first open to the public match is in Athens at the Turner Soccer Complex in Athens against Georgia Revolution. They have 2 matches against Celaya FC and the Chivas in Guadalajara, February 6th and 13th, and then they go to Birmingham to play the Legion. That is, of course, open to the public on February 20th. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see them go to Athens. They have a good fan base out there. That being said, it's a little far from Atlanta, so you wonder how many people actually make the trip on a weekly basis. Maybe a lot of people do, but it's still a little ways from Atlanta. But I think it's good for them to get really toward the outer reaches of their fan territory.
Yeah.
That's where they are, like Darren Neals was saying. So I'll be really excited to see. I think that's going to be a lot of fun, especially.
I think it would be so much fun if like a bunch of students went out there to go watch the game. I mean, you could have actually a really good atmosphere. College students in a sporting event. The sports are actually secondary.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think they would have a great time. Hopefully, the weather is good. It's been really cold here as of late, by Georgia standards at least. But I'm really pleased. And the only kind of shame about the Athens trip is that they can't play the game in Sanford Stadium, of course, because they would have to remove the hedges to be able to fit a soccer stadium in there, and they're not going to do that unless it's the Olympics or something. So a bit of a shame, but no, I still think it should be a great time, and I think that you're totally right. Like with what Darren Neal said, it's great that they're able to go out there and meet fans where they are. And so I mean, again, we were talking about this before the show started, but when that got released yesterday, it was crazy that it was like 5 days away. It was like, oh man, the season's really getting going here. So, it should be fun. And then when they go to play the Legion, that's going to be in UAB's new stadium. It's called Progressive Stadium, I think.
Protective Stadium,
and it seats 47,000. It will just be the lower bowl, so I think it'll only be like capacity 28,000, but should be a good environment there. And they always do like a smelting thing when the Birmingham Legion score. It's always really fun. They like melt, they like pour melted metal or something.
Nice little club tradition there.
Classic like USL style, goal cellies.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of USL, is Atlanta United to his final season in the USL Championship before they have to MLS Next, or whatever it's called. Yeah, MLS Next Pro. I forget what it's called right now.
Yeah. So that was close enough.
A little bit of sidebar there. But what are your kind of initial thoughts on that? They play there, of course, starting in 2022. It looks like a good group of the MLS 2 teams are headed there. What are your kind of initial thoughts of them moving to this MLS reserve setup versus playing a USL Championship with professionals that really get paid to play the game versus Atlanta United 2 have, which is more younger team, more academy kids, more homegrowns? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm kind of learning about this stuff on the fly. We're really fortunate at Dirty South Soccer to have a real expert kind of in this
Yeah.
area in Greg Outer. You may know him as
Hmm.
Film Fan. That's kind of his online pseudonym that he writes under at Dirty South Soccer. So I'd recommend anybody go out and check out Dirty South Soccer and check out film. When look for the byline Film Fan, and you'll usually find really informative stuff about what's
Yeah.
going on at the USL level and and not even just USL, but like youth academy, Atlanta United's youth academy and just like their development pipelines. And it seems like the MLS Next Pro is going to be just a nice. It's not an addition because you're just kind of changing what you were doing in USL, but it's all the whole reason for it is to just try to be more conducive to help these MLS teams, not grow their pipeline, but like just make it more mature and just
Yeah.
make it a better opportunity for young players to come through. So whenever you see something like that, it's always really exciting.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing how exactly they'll play off. Of course, not this year, but then next year. But yeah, pretty crazy that preseason for Atlanta United, their first friendly comes up on Tuesday. That is coming up pretty soon,
Yeah.
and it'll be good to see the younger players play. I don't expect a lot of the first teamers to be out there, especially on the 30th during the international break. But it'll be good to see the draft picks play. Some of the younger kids, maybe the academy kids, will get some run out there. But
And what we're likely to see is not so much like a game, but like 30-minute
right,
periods. That's usually what they
right,
do. So it'll be like 30-minute periods, and they might do like four of those,
yeah,
just to prepare you in case you were like getting set for an actual game. And sometimes the scores can be really crazy. I mean, I think
yeah.
there was one where like Atlanta United beat some MLS team a couple years ago, like 8-1 or something.
Mhm. Now the match on the 20th, we're kind of expecting that more to be more of a traditional
Yeah,
90-minute affair, right?
I
Against the
I I,
Birmingham Legion,
I think so. Yeah, yeah. Usually the last one is the one that's most kind of game like since the
right,
last tune up. Yeah.
right. Oh,
And
it's
and and I think by the way, the Mexico trip, I mean, that will be really interesting to kind of keep tabs on as well. They did that in 2019.
cool.
Of course, in 2019 they were in CONCACAF Champions League, so I think that
Mhm,
had a little bit to do with that one. But I think in Guadalajara they'll be training at altitude, so that's going to help them
mhm.
endurance wise.
It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun, and it's coming quick. Um, Superman has an addition to the MLS Next Pro, so it's gonna be crazy. I think no salary cap. I expect wealthier teams like Atlanta United to try to lock down talent a good bit more with the expectation of joining the first team the next year. So that's another twist that MLS Next Pro has that
Hmm.
perhaps the USL Championship doesn't have. So you'll be interested to see how that plays out over the next
So
couple years.
So I think the no salary cap thing, like you're not going to sign like a really expensive high price player to play for your for like the
Right.
feeder team essentially. But what the no salary cap does do is it allows teams to do more like bulk like more bulk buying of guys like
Mhm.
Darwin Mateus, who's like an exciting prospect, but also cheap, and this team would give him a player like him a really great opportunity to try to break into Atlanta United. So I think it's going to
Yeah.
give not just Atlanta, but like all these teams an opportunity to develop some foreign players that they can kind of take more gambles that you don't really want to do so much with your MLS roster because the roster slots and everything are kind of so sacred. Or not
Yeah.
sacred, but it's just like, they're precious. You don't want to waste them on players that don't pan out.
Yeah. Speaking of roster spots, how do you feel about these trades going on in MLS? I mean, a lot has happened within
A
the
lot of
past couple
shuffling.
of weeks. Yeah. What are your kind of thoughts?
I mean, I don't have any like specific thoughts on the deals, but I just think it's exciting for the league to just have things shaken up and just see
Hmm.
players going to different teams or players leaving teams. Then teams have to kind of build a new identity. I think obviously like the one that's not really a trade, but with Diego Valeri leaving Portland, I mean I think
Hmm.
that one's a huge one because he's been so much a part of who they are as a club, both on and off the field. It's really exciting, I think, to see trades around the league.
Yeah. Kellen Acosta being traded
Big one. Yep.
under acrimonious circumstances, as he tweeted
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. A lot of drama.
Paul Areola getting traded, and then Matt Turner reportedly headed to Arsenal. That's another big one.
Yeah.
And Turner, another player that has really risen
Kind of
to
similar to
stratospheric levels.
Miles,
Yeah.
right? Like kind of like just like in terms of this rise over the last,
Mhm.
2 or 3 years and obviously having these like incredible opportunities. It would be really fun to see a guy like Turner go to Arsenal, and yeah, it would just be really fun for fans of
No.
MLS to be able to see one of their guys over there playing for one of the biggest, most notable, teams with a huge exposure around the world.
No, exactly, exactly, and it's really exciting for him, considering that move does go through. But yeah, the season's coming up on February 27th. We'll be here before you know it. Joe Patrick from for your own Joe Patrick, I should say, from 1990 The Game, and of course, 30 South Soccer. Thanks so much for coming on, sir, and I'm sure we'll talk to you
Yeah,
at some point during the season.
would love to join you again. It's always really fun to come on and talk to you, Sydney. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Thanks.
Joe Patrick from Dirty South Soccer, as I said, in 92.9 The Game. Always good to have him here on Five Stripes Tonight. You can follow me on Twitter at SHWrites, SHWRITES, and of course, for the latest news, analysis, and opinions around the Atlanta United, you can log into DirtySouthSoccer.com, SB Nation's home, for all things Atlanta United. Thank you so much for joining me tonight on this preseason edition of Five Stripes Tonight. And we'll try to be back, if not on February 25th, if not before the season begins. Hopefully, we'll get another episode out before then. I do want to say that we do want to release a new episode every Friday throughout during the regular season at least, but we might be back with another one before then. So stick around. Our Twitter account at FST_ATL. And of course, I'm at SH Rights on Twitter as well. Again, my name is Sydney Hunt. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. We'll see you next time for another edition of Five Stripes Tonight. So long, everyone.